Well, something else that's going to upset you just as much.
The views and opinions of Jesse Dollemore are solely those of Jesse Dollemore and do not reflect the views and opinions of Brittany Page, who is a far superior person and much more measured and reasonable in her views and analysis.
I was more so struggling with the segue.
Well, there you go. There's your segue.
But this is also going to upset you in a similar way, I think, which is the Supreme Court adopted a new ethics code, or so they announced. We didn't really talk about it because more important things have been going on. But I think it's important to talk about because, well, all this reporting has come out about Justice Thomas and the numerous luxury trips, the gifts, the real estate transactions, how cozy he has been with this billionaire MAGA donor.
And he's not the only one. He is a MAGA donor.
Yeah.
He's not the only one. Alito also is taking part in this ingratiating, self-dealing nonsense as well.
Yeah, he, I believe, failed to recuse himself from a case that involved another rich guy who had paid for a private flight of his.
Yeah.
So there's all these issues, mainly with Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. But I came across this interview on PBS with Kathleen Clark, who is a law professor at the Washington University in St. Louis. And she really goes into how this new ethics code does very little to actually hold the justices accountable.
It doesn't address donor influence. It doesn't address what will happen when justices fail to disclose gifts. It does address the recusal problem by saying nothing will change. It views recusal as a decision for an individual justice. And if a justice fails to recuse, the court won't do anything about it.
So you have read through the whole code now. What does it do? And if it doesn't do anything, why do you think all 9 justices signed on to it?
I believe that the justices, all presidentially nominated and confirmed by the Senate, are in that sense politicians, and they realize that the court is in some jeopardy, in some political jeopardy, because of the scandals uncovered by ProPublica and other journalists. So they felt pressure to take some sort of action, perhaps to stave off Congress from taking action and imposing an actual ethics code that would provide accountability. So I think that this should be seen really as a political document, as a way of addressing a political problem that the court had.
You mentioned that congressional pressure. One of those who has been calling for Congress to impose and enforce a code of ethics is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. He tweeted some of his concerns, which get to a point you raised earlier about enforceability. He said, the question is enforcement. Where do you file a complaint? Who reviews it? How does fact-finding occur? Who compares what happened to what's allowed? That is where the rubber hits the road. So Professor Clark, do I hear you saying none of that is addressed in this code and there is potentially still a role for Congress here?
Oh, there's definitely a role for Congress here. And yes, this code is utterly silent. It's basically a failure to address those really important questions of, who is it that will hold justices accountable and how will they be held accountable? If I could just add one thing, ironically, the court touts the fact that it imposes mandatory ethics training on the court's employees. It does not impose mandatory ethics training on the justices, and that's where the failure has been.
Well, that is disappointing, to say the least. No punitive mechanism, no mechanism for oversight. It's just rules written down on a piece of paper that aren't enforceable.
Yeah, it's just address public perception.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, this is a letter or a portion of a letter from the Senate Judiciary Committee chaired by Dick Durbin from Illinois that I've read multiple times on YouTube. But there's an element to this or a paragraph of this that really needs to be talked about because the Supreme Court, in a fulsome manner, believes they are above oversight. Mm-hmm. That they don't need a code of conduct. This is in the letter here. 11 years ago, this is from the chairman, Dick Durbin. 11 years ago, several members of the committee, including the current chair, sent you the attached letter urging the court to adopt a resolution stating that the justices of the court abide by the Judicial Conference's Code of Conduct for the United States judges, a code that binds every other judge in the federal judiciary. You responded, this is a letter to John Roberts, you, John Roberts, responded that the court, quote, does not plan to adopt the Code of Conduct for the United States judges through a formal resolution, and referenced your 2011 year-end report in which you said, quote, the court has had no reason to adopt the Code of Conduct as its definitive source of ethical guidance, when clearly the case remains that you do. You do need ethical guidance. If you didn't, there wouldn't be all of this bombshell reporting from ProPublica about all of the lavish trips that are being just heaped upon the justices, who then in turn give favorable rulings to the people who are giving them the money.
Especially when the other justices seem to have this figured out, right? The federal rules require the disclosure of gifts valued at $415 or higher.
Right.
Ketanji Brown Jackson, the newest justice, received like a $1,200 bouquet of flowers from Oprah, noted it on her disclosure. Right. She got to keep a dress from her Vogue photo shoot, which was like $6,500, put it on her disclosure. She's brand new. Yeah. And she was able to figure out what she needed to disclose on her disclosures.
Well, listen, that's part of the deal here is transparency. I mean, look, do I feel uncomfortable that she's being given $6,500 dresses? Yes. But does it make me more uncomfortable that that Alito and Thomas are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in vacations and yacht stays and private chartered flights, and they're not being disclosed? Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes a long way to make these things public, and we'll see just how transparent they are in their new setup with reporting when there's no mechanism to actually hold them accountable.
Right, and the big thing is that there's no one independent of that system to come in, like an inspector general or something like that can come in and, independent of the court, do an investigation for whatever wrongdoing has occurred and hold the justices accountable. But they seem to be more concerned about what public opinion is of the court and protecting what the public believes about the court than actually doing something meaningful.
Look, the problem is, I mean, when our country and the system of government we have was envisioned by our founders, there was this robust system of checks and balances in place. And when you have one branch that feels they're above all the others, above oversight from the Congress, when in the Constitution, Article 3 gives Congress the power to organize the courts. They wail and they cry and they whine when any talk of packing the court happens. Wait, it just needs to stay 9. That's what's most appropriate. We can't have 11 or 13 or 15 or 17 or 21 justices. Oh no, that would dilute. Just shut up. Do what you need to do. Be honorable in your duties, and you won't need to be threatened with diluting the power of the conservatives on the court, because it's not the liberals, it's not your Ketanji Brown Jacksons who are doing the wrong thing. It's the people who have been there the longest, know how to cheat the system, and don't mind sullying the reputation and the objectivity of the Supreme Court, meaning Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, the rest of these dipshits.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would love to know what you think about that, 657-464-7609, or you can send an email to idoubitit@dollemore.com.